Williams for that. Joining us now, NBC senior political analyst Mark Halperin, along with NBC News intelligence and national security reporter Ken Dilanian, both in Washington. Ken, I want to start with you. So the president's people yesterday feeling somewhat vindicated because we heard Jim Comey say the president over and over was not under investigation. The president back then wanting Jim Comey to reveal that. He did not at the time. So help us sort this all out here. Could that status change? And really, what would be the tipping point?
This is one of the most interesting things about yesterday's hearing, Yasmin. We learned that Comey assured the president he wasn't under counterintelligence investigation then, but Comey also made clear he believes that the president is now under investigation for obstruction of justice by the special counsel, Robert Mueller. He didn't say that directly, but at different points he said he was sure that the special counsel would look at this obstruction question, and he disclosed that he had turned over all the memos that he wrote after each of his 9 conversations, phone calls, and meetings with the president to the special counsel. So Trump may not have been under investigation then, but he seems to be under it now.
And Mark, I wanted to play you this controversial moment from yesterday when James Comey revealed how he went through a friend to get a story in the newspaper. Listen to this.
The president tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation. There might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a close friend of mine to do it.
And was that Mr. Wittes?
No, no.
Who was that?
A good friend of mine who's a professor at Columbia Law School. I understood this to be my recollection recorded of my conversation with the president. As a private citizen, I felt free to share that. I thought it very important to get it out. My view was that the content of those unclassified, the memorialization of those conversations was my recollection recorded.
So why didn't you give those to somebody yourself rather than give them through a third party?
Because I was worried the media was camping at the end of my driveway at that point, and I was actually going out of town with my wife to hide, and I worried it would be like feeding seagulls at the beach.
Mr. Comey, you encouraged the president to release the tapes. Will you encourage the Department of Justice or your friend at Columbia or Mr. Mueller to release your memos?
Sure.
So I got to imagine, and as we heard, Mark, a little bit from the lawyer afterwards, Trump's personal lawyer, he jumped on that saying, like, now that is evidence that Jim Comey was and is a leaker in the administration, sharing that privileged executive conversations. I got to imagine that others are going to pounce on this. You think that's going to come back and haunt him?
Well, you didn't need that instance, Eamon, to know, just from reading newspaper accounts over the last year about Jim Comey, that this is something he does on a regular basis. In this case, which is to say he uses his friends and colleagues to give stories to newspapers that serve his purposes. Sometimes they seem to be to burnish his own image. Sometimes in this case, it's to try to shake things up. He says to get an independent counsel. He was basically acting as a whistleblower, using a cutout to do it. And while that's something you could imagine a private citizen doing, or someone who's a low-level bureaucrat, this is the former director of the FBI. And I think it opened the door for a lot of Trump supporters to say, this seems like unorthodox behavior. If Jim Comey has something to say, if he wants to spur activity, then perhaps people say he should do it himself. He should do it in a public way, not as some whistleblower operating in the dark.
Yeah, it certainly demonstrates that he's got some kind of political shrewdness, the way that he was at least sharing that information.
Yeah, Ken, I want to talk a little bit about the role of Attorney General Jeff Sessions and what he played here, why Comey surmised that Sessions had to recuse himself from the Russia investigation here. How are there meetings that we don't necessarily know about between Sessions and the Russians? Is there more to this?
There may be, Yasmin. Comey said during the hearing that for reasons he couldn't disclose in a public session, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself from this Russia investigation. That raises a host of questions. What are we talking about here? One thing that NBC News has learned is that the FBI and Congress is looking at one particular event at the Mayflower Hotel during the presidential campaign back in April, where there appears to be intelligence that Jeff Sessions and others had a meeting with the Russian ambassador, Sergei Kislyak. Now, Sessions adamantly denies that he had this meeting, and he has already had to correct his under oath testimony to Congress about 2 other meetings with Kislyak. So that's why this is a huge issue. You don't get a second chance to correct your sworn testimony. But, you know, our sources are telling us the intelligence is not clear. They're investigating it. Whether a meeting happened is unknown at this point, Yasmin.
Hey, Mark, let me ask you about another interesting development yesterday, which is the president